This morning, as we step into the sacred atmosphere of prayer, we align ourselves with the unshakable power of Psalm 91. In this hour, heaven leans in to respond to the cry of those who dare to believe that God is not only their refuge, but their defender, their shield, and their strong tower. Today you awaken to a divine assurance. God Himself rises to contend with every force contending with you. Every battle assigned to break you will become the very stage where God demonstrates His strength on your behalf. As you open your spirit to this prayer, you position yourself for supernatural intervention, divine protection, and miraculous provision. There is a financial breakthrough that is already being released in your direction, a miracle orchestrated by the hand of God, waiting to be attracted by your faith, your expectation, and your willingness to receive. This moment is not ordinary, it is prophetic, it is strategic, and it is loaded with transformative power. You are stepping into a dimension where fear cannot follow, where lack loses its grip, and where the enemies of your destiny scatter. As you hear this prayer, the atmosphere around you shifts, the chains that once held you dissolve, and the doors that refuse to open begin to swing wide, because God Himself is fighting for you in ways you cannot see but will soon experience. When God arises to fight battles you cannot see, the entire atmosphere of your life begins to shift. There are struggles, pressures, and invisible forces that attempt to work against your progress, but you are not left defenseless. The moment God steps into the battlefield on your behalf, every opposing agenda is dismantled. You may not always perceive the warfare, but you will always experience the results of divine intervention. In the unseen realm, strategies are being overturned, traps are being destroyed, and every hidden plan that was designed to hinder your purpose is being exposed and rendered powerless. You are not navigating life alone. You are backed by the fullness of heaven's authority, and God Himself is actively contending for your breakthrough. There are moments when the battles intensify because your next level is near, and the forces assigned to delay you sense the shift. But this is the very moment when God steps in as your warrior, your advocate, and your defender. He goes before you to make crooked places straight, to shatter gates of bronze, and to break bars of iron. While you rest in His presence, He is dismantling strongholds that have existed for years. While you worship, He is scattering enemies that thought they had the advantage. While you pray, He is reversing decisions, overturning verdicts, and rewriting outcomes in your favor. Some battles are too complex for human strength, too deeply rooted for natural solutions, and too strategic for ordinary intervention. But none of them intimidate God. He sees every dimension of the conflict, past, present, and future, and He moves with precision. When He fights for you, He goes after what you cannot reach. He handles what you cannot confront, and He defeats what you cannot discern. His involvement guarantees your victory, because no force can withstand the one who commands angels, governs times and seasons, and holds dominion over every realm. As you surrender the unseen battles into His hands, you position yourself for divine empowerment. You begin to walk with a boldness that comes from knowing that God is behind you, beside you, and ahead of you. Every battle you entrust to Him becomes a testimony waiting to manifest. You may not have all the answers, but you have the assurance that the one fighting for you has never lost a battle. You will begin to sense breakthroughs unfolding, not by your might, but by His power working on your behalf. When divine protection surrounds you on every side, you begin to move through life with a confidence that does not come from human reassurance, but from spiritual certainty. Psalm 91 establishes a covenantal truth. You are covered, shielded, and fortified by the presence of God. This protection is not passive, it is active, strategic, and deeply intentional. It is the kind of protection that goes before you, walks with you, and stands behind you, ensuring that nothing formed against you can prosper. The forces that once intimidated you lose their influence because you are wrapped in a supernatural covering that cannot be penetrated by fear, danger, or demonic assignment. Divine protection means that even when threats arise, they cannot touch what God has marked as His own. There are arrows that fly by day and terrors that attempt to creep in at night, but they lose their power when God surrounds you like a wall of fire. His presence becomes your shield, absorbing what was meant to harm you and redirecting what was meant to distract you. You are not left vulnerable to the elements of life. You are fortified by a spiritual barrier that is impenetrable. Even in moments when you are unaware of the dangers around you, God is fully aware and actively blocking what was meant to break you. This divine protection extends beyond physical safety. It covers your mind, your emotions, your finances, your relationships, and your destiny. Every area connected to you receives the benefit of God's protective hand. He guards your thoughts from spiraling into fear. He guards your heart from carrying unnecessary burdens. And He guards your path from stepping into places that would have delayed your purpose. What others stumble over, you will walk past. What derails others will be unable to slow you down. You carry an unseen covering that cannot be removed by circumstances or challenged by opposition. As you step into environments where uncertainty lingers, you are not stepping in alone. Angels accompany you, divine strength envelops you, and God's presence goes before you as a spiritual force field. Even when the world is shaken, you remain steady because you are anchored under the shadow of the Almighty. You may hear of chaos, see turmoil, or sense instability around you, but it will not touch you because you are hidden in a place where God Himself has positioned you. His covering protects you from what you know and from what you don't know. It shields you from dangers seen and unseen, from attacks planned and unplanned, from storms predicted and storms unexpected. You walk each day surrounded, safeguarded, and strengthened by a protection that cannot fail. When your faith attracts supernatural provision, you begin to understand that heaven responds not to desperation, but to expectation. Faith is a spiritual magnet. It pulls into your life what God has already prepared for you. There are resources, opportunities, connections, and breakthroughs assigned to your destiny, and faith is the force that draws them out of the unseen realm into manifestation. When you rise in the morning and align your words, thoughts, and spirit with God's promises, you set in motion a divine flow of provision that overrides lack, scarcity, and limitation. Faith positions you to receive what your natural circumstances say you cannot have because it does not operate by earthly rules, but by spiritual authority. Supernatural provision is not confined to money alone. It includes wisdom, open doors, strategies, solutions, favor, and divine timing. There are moments when you need more than finances. You need clarity. You need strength. You need direction. You need the right people at the right time. Faith attracts all of these because faith is the language that heaven understands. When you believe, speak, and stand on what God has promised, you give Him access to move freely in your affairs. Every time you choose faith over fear, you shift your life into a realm where miracles become normal and provision becomes continuous. Your faith creates an atmosphere where supernatural supply can locate you, even when you feel unqualified. Even when you lack the resources others consider essential, faith bridges the gap between your need and God's abundance. It draws into your hands what seemed out of reach, and it accelerates processes that were supposed to take years. Faith is not passive. It is a spiritual force that pushes back darkness, breaks the grip of lack, and commands increase to flow toward you. It calls forth what you cannot see and summons what has not yet manifested. There are blessings already traveling in your direction because your faith set them into motion. Every declaration of trust becomes a seed in the realm of the Spirit. Every moment you choose to believe in spite of what you see becomes a signal to heaven that you are ready for divine release. Faith turns closed doors into access points. It reshapes outcomes. It transforms impossible situations. It invites God to demonstrate his ability in ways that exceed human logic. As your faith rises, supernatural provision is activated, aligning resources you did not know existed, bringing opportunities you did not ask for, and creating pathways you could not have imagined. When God begins canceling assignments of fear and anxiety from your life, you step into a dimension where your spirit becomes stabilized. Your mind becomes cleared and your heart becomes strengthened. Fear is one of the greatest weapons the enemy uses to paralyze potential, delay destiny, and suffocate faith. Anxiety seeks to drain your strength before the battle even begins, whispering lies, magnifying problems, and distorting your perception of what God is doing. But when God intervenes, every assignment of fear loses its authority and every cycle of anxiety begins to break. His presence carries a peace that dissolves the noise of intimidation and quiets the internal storms that attempt to overwhelm you. Fear is not just an emotion, it is a spiritual strategy designed to disconnect you from confidence and sabotage your ability to step boldly into purpose. It exaggerates threats, minimizes your identity, and warps your sense of direction. But when God rises on your behalf, fear is exposed as powerless. The chains that once tightened around your thoughts begin to fall off as God replaces fear with courage, anxiety with assurance, and uncertainty with divine stability. He does not merely calm the symptoms, he goes to the root and dismantles the spirit behind it. There are anxieties you carried silently, battles you fought in your mind, and pressures that weighed on your heart. But God has already begun canceling their influence. You may not have noticed the shift immediately, but something within you has started to rise that cannot be shaken by external circumstances. God fortifies your inner being, strengthening you with a resilience that refuses to bow to fear. He renews your mind so that thoughts of panic are replaced with thoughts of purpose. He steadies your emotions so that waves of worry lose their ability to dictate your decisions. As God cancels these assignments, you begin to walk with a new authority. Situations that once intimidated you no longer have the same impact. Things that used to provoke anxiety now meet a fortified spirit within you. You carry a peace that does not come from the environment around you, but from the presence of God within you. His peace becomes your guard, your shield, and your internal compass. Even when challenges arise, you are no longer controlled by fear because God has reclaimed the territory of your mind and established his dominion there. You enter each day with a renewed sense of clarity, strength, and confidence, knowing that fear no longer governs your path and anxiety no longer dictates your steps. God has canceled every assignment meant to overwhelm you. When breakthroughs begin to align with your words, you recognize the profound spiritual truth that your mouth is a gateway, a tool, and a force capable of unlocking supernatural movement. What you speak carries weight in the realm of the spirit. Words are not passive sounds. They are seeds, commands, and declarations that shape the atmosphere around you. When your words come into agreement with what God has spoken, breakthroughs that once seemed delayed begin to accelerate. Doors that resisted you begin to respond. Situations that stood still begin to shift because heaven moves in response to alignment. Your words create pathways for manifestation. When you declare life, you invite life. When you speak increase, you attract increase. When you stand on God's promises and speak them with conviction, you establish divine order in places where chaos once ruled. Breakthroughs are not random events, they are the result of spiritual alignment, divine timing, and intentional declaration. Every time you choose to speak faith instead of fear, you are authorizing heaven to intervene. Every time you declare victory instead of defeat, you are canceling the enemy's access. Every time you speak what God has said, you position yourself for supernatural release. There are breakthroughs assigned to your voice: financial breakthroughs, emotional breakthroughs, relational breakthroughs, spiritual breakthroughs. They respond to the authority God placed in your words. When you choose silence in moments that require declaration, the atmosphere remains unchanged. But when you speak with boldness, clarity, and faith, you disrupt cycles that were designed to hold you back. Your words become the catalyst that activates divine movement. What seemed unreachable begins to draw near. What seemed impossible begins to make room for you. As your vocabulary shifts, your reality shifts. You begin to renounce limitations that once defined you, and you embrace the identity and authority that God has given you. You stop agreeing with the narratives of lack, fear, and defeat, and you start speaking the language of breakthrough, abundance, and victory. This alignment transforms the way you think, the way you perceive challenges, and the way you respond to adversity. Your words become instruments of transformation, forging new pathways in the spirit and dismantling barriers in the natural. Breakthroughs align when your mouth matches your faith. This is why you must be intentional with every declaration. Speak with precision. Speak with authority. Speak with expectation. Your words carry the power to activate what has been waiting for you, to call forth what has been held up, and to usher in the breakthroughs that have been assigned to your destiny. When financial miracles respond to spiritual obedience, you begin to understand that provision is not merely a transaction, it is a divine partnership. God does not pour out increase randomly. He responds to alignment, faith, and obedience. Spiritual obedience positions you under an open heaven where resources flow freely, opportunities locate you, and divine favor meets you at every turn. There are levels of provision that are not accessed through effort alone, but through alignment with God's instructions, principles, and timing. When you obey, even when it doesn't make sense, you activate a chain of supernatural responses designed to usher financial breakthrough into your life. Obedience is a spiritual key that unlocks doors human strength cannot open. It draws heaven's attention and signals that you are ready for the next dimension of blessing. Sometimes the instruction God gives is small, simple, or seemingly insignificant, yet it carries the power to unlock extraordinary provision. A seed sown, a step taken, a prayer prayed, a shift in attitude, a moment of surrender. These acts of obedience create movement in the spirit that eventually manifests as financial increase. What looks insignificant in the natural becomes catalytic in the supernatural. Financial miracles are often attracted not by need alone, but by willingness to follow divine direction. Obedience communicates trust, and trust invites God to release resources you could not attain on your own. When you obey, you are telling heaven that you are ready to steward increase. You are declaring that you prioritize God's voice over your own comfort, logic, or fear. This level of obedience becomes a magnet for provision. Unexpected checks open doors, accelerated promotions, canceled debts, creative ideas, strategic connections, and streams of income that were previously blocked begin to emerge. As you move in obedience, you begin to see that financial miracles are not isolated events, but patterns of divine faithfulness. They appear at the intersection of preparation, faith, and surrender. What you obey today sets the stage for what God releases tomorrow. It breaks cycles of lack, dismantles limitations, and ushers you into a flow where increase becomes consistent rather than sporadic. You no longer strive, you align. You no longer chase, you attract. Obedience also sharpens your discernment. You begin to recognize divine opportunities that others overlook. You sense when to move, when to wait, when to invest, when to release, and when to step forward. Your decisions become influenced by heaven rather than pressured by circumstances. And as you follow these divine nudges, financial miracles begin to unfold with precision, timing, and ease. You stand in a place where supernatural provision becomes a natural outcome of spiritual obedience. When angelic assistance is being activated on your behalf, you step into a realm where help is no longer limited to human capacity. There are assignments, battles, and breakthroughs that require supernatural intervention, and God dispatches his angels to ensure that nothing interferes with what he has ordained for your life. Angels are not passive observers. They are divine messengers, warriors, protectors, and carriers of breakthrough. When they are activated, they move with precision, authority, and speed, executing instructions from heaven concerning your destiny. There are moments when you do not see the warfare, but angels are already fighting, blocking, shielding, and clearing the path ahead of you. Angelic assistance means you are never outnumbered, never undefended, and never navigating life alone. In the unseen realm, angels surround you, accompany you, and walk ahead of you to disrupt traps the enemy hoped you would fall into. They dismantle spiritual ambushes, silence demonic interference, and stand guard over what God has entrusted to you. Every time you pray with faith, every time you declare God's word, every time you align with his will, you activate angelic movement. What seemed delayed begins to accelerate. What appeared impossible begins to shift. What was blocked begins to open. There are angels assigned specifically to your calling, your ministry, your finances, your family, and your purpose. They know your path, they know your battles, and they know the strategic moments when intervention is required. They minister strength to you when you feel weak. They whisper clarity when confusion attempts to cloud your mind. They guard you in moments when danger attempts to draw near. They push back darkness when it tries to surround you. You may not see them, but their impact is evident in the protection, breakthroughs, and divine alignments that unfold around your life. As angelic assistance is activated, you begin to experience an ease that cannot be explained by natural means. Situations resolve without your effort. Opportunities come without your pursuit. Favor appears without your striving. Angels influence conversations, positioning you for outcomes that benefit your destiny. They go ahead of you into rooms you have not entered, preparing the atmosphere for your arrival. They stand behind you, preventing sabotage, betrayal, and spiritual opposition from gaining access. This assistance shifts the way you move through life. You no longer operate from fear, but from awareness of the divine reinforcement surrounding you. You walk with a confidence that comes from knowing heaven is actively participating in your journey. You move with assurance because angelic forces are working, aligning, guiding, defending, and carrying out God's instructions concerning your life.